This is Letter from America. Today's topic: Kenyan elections make Zimbabwe's primitive by any standards. The Kenyan elections were held on Tuesday, August 9. Except for a few incidents, the elections were peaceful as Kenyans enjoyed exercising their right to vote. Zimbabweans could only look with envy at the way the Kenyan elections were conducted. By any reasonable standards, the electoral playing field was level and gave everyone an equal chance to contest or to select their candidates. The Kenyan mass media, comprising print and broadcast, were open to all candidates and their political parties. All sides openly and freely expressed their views and were covered extensively by the mass media. No one party dominated the others in terms of media coverage. Political candidates in Kenya campaigned freely at rallies around the country. No rallies were banned or blocked. Kenyan broadcast and print media gave plenty coverage to all political parties. In Zimbabwe, TV, only ZANU-PF candidates are covered all the time. Kenya has a vibrant mass media. The country has more than 91 FM stations, more than 64 free-to-view TV stations, and scores of print newspapers and magazines. In a remarkable night and day contrast, Zimbabwe has only one commercial broadcast station, ZBC-TV, and it is clearly a ZANU mouthpiece. According to one observer, the internet in Kenya was not shut off, as happened in Zimbabwe during the elections. Voting materials in the Kenyan elections arrived on time at most of the polling stations. None of the presidential candidates was arrested, detained, or harassed. No polling agent was arrested for exercising his rights. The Kenyan army was in the barracks, not in the streets, as happened in Zimbabwe. The diaspora Kenyans in North America and Europe were also able to vote. They did not have to travel to Kenya to vote. Arrangements were made for them to vote abroad. Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF are very strongly against Zimbabwean diaspora voting in next year's elections, and this is for very obvious reasons. Kenya and Zimbabwe share a common legacy of British colonialism. Yet Kenya has followed a more democratic path than Zimbabwe, which is mired under the ZANU-PF authoritarian rule. Zimbabweans visiting Kenya are mesmerized by the democratic culture that defines Kenya's independence. Kenyan elections make Zimbabwean elections look primitive and barbaric by any standards. Countries in SADC are making great efforts towards free and fair elections. Only Zimbabwe stands out like a sore thumb in the totalitarian and oppressed way it runs the country and elections. The Zimbabwean army and police have since 2000 allowed themselves to be used by ZANU-PF to harass the opposition parties, especially the MDC under Tsvangirai and now Triple C under Chamisa. However, and strangely enough, in 2019, Lieutenant General Philip Valerio Sibanda, the commander of the Zimbabwean National Army and the commander-in-chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, condemned corruption in Zimbabwe. Sibanda said during the armed struggle for liberation, freedom fighters were taught the values of sharing resources. He said the soldiers of the E.L. Smith regime used as propaganda depictions of top Zanla leaders with large amounts of food, while the lower ranks were starving and with no food at all. A song called Nzira Soldier, or How Liberation Freedom Fighters or Soldiers Behave, which was very popular because it extolled the values of sharing and caring. The big question is, does General Sibanda have any plan at all to deal with the corruption? He may well say he is a soldier and the civilian authorities should deal with the problems of corruption. Yet he was involved in the overthrow of Robert Mugabe in 2017, ostensibly to deal with the corrupt elements in the Mugabe administration. He would not have said, let civilians handle the fate of Mugabe. It is, however, and nevertheless a relief that the army spokespersons no longer declare they will not salute a president who did not serve in the liberation struggle as they used to do in the past. A video of a soldier condemning ZANU-PF's use of the army to defend the party and its corruption went viral on the social media. The soldier said it was not the role of the army to defend the interests of a corrupt political party like ZANU-PF. He said the army's role is to defend the country against the enemies, largely from outside. There is a growing resentment in the army, police, and the CIO against being used to promote the interests of ZANU-PF through corruption and atrocities against the members of the opposition, especially CCC. These security agencies, the army, the police, and CIO, feel their reputation as a professional army is being undermined. Some police and army officers are reported to have told the CCC leaders that they are all yellow, that they do not support some of the orders they get to block CCC rallies or not to arrest ZANU-PF criminals. We are carrying out orders that undermine us as security agencies, one officer remarked. Zimbabwean army has about 30,000 soldiers with 5,000 in the Air Force. The Zimbabwe Republic Police amounts to about 45,000 police officers. ZANU believes the army and the police force belong to ZANU-PF, as the party spokesperson Chris Muchwanga once said. What ZANU-PF fails to understand or refuses to understand is that the army and the police are bound by the Constitution to protect all the citizens and not to be part of any political formation. This is the point some army and police officers are trying to tell ZANU-PF, namely they are bound by the Constitution not to be partisan, but to be a national protection force. The Constitution of a country is a set of values that define the nature and the extent of the country's government. The Constitution is sometimes referred to as the country's fundamental or basic law and has supremacy over all other laws. A constitution establishes the basic institutions of the state and regulates the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches of government and the relationships between those branches. Many modern constitutions also regulate relationships between individuals and their government, particularly by guaranteed individuals certain fundamental rights. Founding principles of the Constitution can be described as those values that citizens commit themselves to their adherence. They are the foundations of the Constitution and they reflect the manner in which people desire to be governed. The roles and responsibilities of the army and police are clearly spelled out in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. The army and police are duty-bound to respect and obey the Constitution. There are penalties for acting against the Constitution. It is, however, true that as long as ZANU-PF is in power, the soldiers and police who act contrary or against the Constitution by promoting ZANU-PF atrocities and corruption will not be prosecuted. But ZANU-PF will not rule Zimbabwe forever. A new party that will replace ZANU-PF will hold these soldiers who violated the Constitution accountable. The Constitution of Zimbabwe, Section 18(1)(a) to be exact, states that public officers owe a duty to everyone in Zimbabwe to observe and to uphold the rule of the law. This means that people's rights and obligations must be determined by laws rather than by individuals or groups of individuals exercising an arbitrary discretion. Part 9 of the Constitution deals with the police force, the function of which is stated to be to preserve the internal security of and to maintain law and order in Zimbabwe. In order to put the actions of the military in their proper perspective, it is important to restate that the Constitution says what the Constitution says about the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. First, however, in Section 208, the Constitution sets out certain principles that relate to the whole security establishment. These principles apply without exception to the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. This section in the Constitution provides the following stipulations. Members of the security services must act in accordance with this Constitution and the rule of law. Neither the security services nor any of their members may, in the exercise of their functions, act in a partisan manner, further the interests of any political party or cause. Members of the security forces must not prejudice the lawful interests of any political party or cause, or violate the fundamental rights or freedoms of any person. Members of the security services must not be active members or office bearers of any political party or organization. Serving members of the security services must not be employed or engaged in civilian institutions except in periods of public emergency. Under the Police Act, the Constitution sets out the role of the police. The Constitution prohibits the police, just like the army, in an unambiguous language, from involvement in politics. The rationale for this is obvious. It It is now a globally accepted norm that the involvement of the military in politics has a negative bearing on the democratization process in any country. In terms of the Constitution, civilian policing is a mandate that vests in the police service. Section 219 of the Constitution provides that there is a police service which is responsible for detecting, investigating, and preventing crime without any partisan bias, preserving the internal security of Zimbabwe, protecting and securing the lives and property of the people, maintaining law and order, and upholding the Constitution and enforcing the law without fear or favor. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the police or the army must be instruments of ZANU-PF control. The Constitution is very clear. The security agencies, the army and the police must not be involved in partisan politics. Despite these roles and obligations of security agencies, the army and police in Zimbabwe habitually engage in acts of atrocities against civilians at the behest of ZANU-PF. Writing in the Standard News, journalist Miriam Mangwaya says any talk of elections in Zimbabwe evokes memories of sadness, psychological torture, and fear. Miriam Magwai writes that millions of Zimbabweans are still haunted by experiences of the past elections, which have been marred by violence, disputes, and rights abuses. These abuses by the army and police include killings by security forces, arrests and beatings of opposition supporters and journalists, disruption and ban of opposition rallies without thorough investigation and the prosecution of the perpetrators. Maguire writes that electoral observers say army and police atrocities against civilians have contributed to the growing voter apathy as millions of Zimbabweans have refused to take heed of calls by political parties to register to vote in the 2023 elections. Official statistics from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, or ZEC, show that 5,804,975 Zimbabweans are on the voters' roll, a mere 2% increase from the 2018 figure of 5,695,706 voters. This is against a total of 8 million eligible voters in the country, as estimated by electoral watchdogs. Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum Executive Director Musa Kika casts doubts on the possibilities of authorities implementing the required electoral reforms to guarantee free and fair elections. Election seasons in Zimbabwe are periods of great anxiety and trauma. These are also periods of heightened repression, heightened security activity, and heightened abuse of human rights, Kika said. Thus far, we are yet to see the electoral reforms that many have been pushing for. It is doubtful that we will see any reform prior to 2023. Positive reforms, that is. Kika continued. That being the case, 2023 will be no different from the other elections we have witnessed in the previous years. The year 2023 might in fact be worse on account of the fact that we seem to be dealing with a wounded regime that is advancing its power consolidation project with great vigor and determination, seeing that winning power through winning people's hearts and minds has failed, Kika said. Zimbabwe could learn from recent elections in Kenya, Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, Malawi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, where elections have been conducted in a relatively free and fair environment. ZANU-PF must learn that the army, the police, elections, or the country of Zimbabwe are not the properties of ZANU-PF.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank